I'm super excited for this upcoming NBA season, and the biggest reason for that is I believe this year we legitimately have more contenders than I ever remember talking about. In this video, I'm going to lay out the NBA championship landscape as I see it and talk a little bit about each team involved. In my mind, there are 5 NBA teams that I would call tier 1 clear-cut contenders. These are the 5 teams that I think are a clear step above every other team in the NBA. And those 5 teams are Milwaukee and Boston from the Eastern Conference, and then the Suns, the Nuggets, and the Lakers from the Western Conference. And then I also have 5 other teams that I'm going to call fringe contenders. These are teams that I think have an outside shot at winning the NBA championship, but I think are much more lower confidence bets, and a lot needs to go right for them to make it deep into the playoffs. Those 5 teams are Cleveland and Miami from the East, the Grizzlies, the Warriors, and the Clippers from the West. Now, first, let me address one team from each conference that I left off the fringe contender list. I am not considering Philadelphia even a fringe contender this upcoming year. And a lot of this, of course, hinges on what's happening with James Harden, but it very much looks like Harden will not play another minute for the Sixers. The one argument to be made for them to put them in the fringe contender list would be that Nick Nurse is a significant upgrade over Doc Rivers, which I think he is. It's just not enough to overcome how much worse this roster got. And then from the Western Conference, the team that I left off the list was the Dallas Mavericks. And some people might have the Dallas Mavericks as fringe contenders in the West. But I'll give you 2 reasons why I don't have the Mavericks. One is just that if I put the Mavericks in the fringe contender list, I will then have 7 teams from the West that I will list as contenders or fringe contenders, meaning that, the 7th seed in my projections is going to be a team with fringe contention status, which just does not make a lot of sense to me. It happens. We just saw the Miami Heat go to the NBA Finals as the 8th seed, but no 7th or 8th seed has ever won the NBA championship. At least the 6th seed has won it before. That was one of the Hakeem Olajuwon years back in the mid-90s. So I can justify it in my head to put at least 6 contenders on my list. It's hard for me to put 7. And so if I have to pick 6, I'm going to leave the Mavericks out. So that's the reason number 1. Reason number 2, and why I don't have the Mavericks as high as the Grizzlies, the Warriors, or the Clippers even, is because I don't see a pathway for this team to get to even league average defensively. So if I don't project the Mavericks to be even a league average defense, I just cannot project them to possibly be contenders under any scenario. Okay, with that being said, let me now talk about the fringe contenders. So starting the Eastern Conference with the Cleveland Cavaliers. And some people might be a bit surprised that I have the Cavaliers as even contenders, considering this team lost in the first round last year against the Knicks. But here's the case I would make for the Cavaliers being considered contenders. Number 1, they were 2nd in the league last year in net rating. That is a pretty big deal. Net rating is just a calculation of how good were you on a per possession basis on offense versus defense. They were the number 1 ranked defense last year and the number 7th ranked offense. Reason number 2. 2 out of the 3 best players, Darius Garland and Evan Mobley, are young, and you could see them taking another step forward. Evan Mobley in particular is a player that I think has legitimate all-star, all-NBA caliber potential, but because of coaching reasons and because he is still very young, that has not necessarily translated into production yet. Now, their first round loss to New York last year was really bad, don't get me wrong. That pointed out a lot of flaws with the team, but the biggest flaw that it pointed out was one that the Cavaliers fixed this offseason, and that is shooting. They added Niang, they added Strus, and those 2 players in particular are bigger players that could shoot, something that they did not have on their roster last year. And then we get to the Miami Heat. The case for them is also very simple. They are the reigning Eastern Conference defending champions, and they did not get noticeably worse. Now, they did lose Max Strus and Gabe Vincent in free agency, but they added Josh Richardson. They also should get contributions from rookie Jaquez Jr., who looks like a very polished rookie. Jovic, who will get his chances to play some minutes as well. Caleb Martin is a player for them that really came on in the playoffs, but in the regular season did not play as many minutes as he will this year. They added Thomas Bryant, who I think is a clear upgrade over Cody Zeller. Now, I am aware that amongst people who are really into the X's and O's of basketball, that they noticed how Tyler Hero's absence last year actually made Miami a better defensive team and allowed them to play a style of basketball that was perhaps better suited for the playoffs. I'm not entirely discounting that theory, but at the same time, I am not ready to go as far as to say that they were better off without Tyler Hero last year. I think there were clearly still moments last year where they really needed the shot creation that Tyler Hero could have provided, and guys like Vincent and Strus simply could not. Jimmy Butler himself was clearly not 100% after he sprained his ankle against the New York Knicks in the second round. So healthy Hero, healthy Butler, I don't see why the Miami Heat should not be considered at least fringe contenders. The case for the Grizzlies is this. This is a team now with a good amount of playoff experience across their roster. Last year, they were competitive against the Lakers in the second round, despite missing Steven Adams and Brandon Clark, who both played pretty significant minutes for them at the big men positions. Now, they do lose Tyus Jones, who was one of the best backup point guards in the NBA, and certainly for the first 25 games, I expect them to struggle a little bit because they don't have the best guard rotation. Once Ja Morant comes back, I don't really have a question about their guard depth. And come playoff time, I think Marcus Smart will prove to be a better player than Dillon Brooks and Tyus Jones combined. Moving on to the Los Angeles Clippers. Here's the way I would put it. If you are going to tell me, if you can guarantee me that Kawhi and Paul George will each play at least 60 games in the regular season and both will be healthy come playoff time, I am happy to move the Clippers up there with the other 5 tier 1 contender teams because Kawhi and Paul George are so good when healthy, and this team is actually deep enough around them with guys like Norman Powell and Mason Plumlee, who, even though both of them have been in the league for quite a few years now, I think both of them are still underrated role players. They have enough depth at all the other positions that I think this team absolutely should be up there with the other contenders. However, because it is such a low probability of both of them staying healthy together, you just cannot put them any higher than being fringe contenders in the NBA. And then for the Golden State Warriors. So the case to be made for the Warriors being fringe contenders is this, that roster-wise, this team does not look that different from the team that won the NBA championship just 2 years ago. The big difference right now is that they have Chris Paul instead of Jordan Poole. Now, Jordan Poole in a vacuum, I think right now is just a better player, but for what was going on off the court with him in Golden State and Draymond, and for what they can do in the playoffs and what the Warriors need from their role players, I think Chris Paul is arguably a better fit. However, the key for the Warriors this upcoming year, I think, is Jonathan Kuminga. I think this is the guy that needs to take a step forward for them. This roster is really old, and you have guys like Clay and Steph and Dre that are getting up there in age. I'm not so much worried about Steph just because he has shown no signs of slowing down, whereas with Klay Thompson and Draymond Green, I am worried about them taking step backs because they've already shown signs of regression in their games. So when you consider most of the players in their core to be taking small steps back or certainly not getting any better, I think for Golden State to keep pace with the rest of the league, they need a guy like Kuminga to really take a leap forward. If he can, I like Golden State's chances of being at least competitive in every single playoff series they're in. All right, now moving on to the 5, what I call number 1 contenders. I'll talk a little bit about, I think, the key points for each of them this upcoming season. So for the Milwaukee Bucks, I think their big question actually is at the role player positions. They did sacrifice some depth to get Damian Lillard. You know, they gave up Grayson Allen, and Grayson Allen is not the best player in the world, but at the same time, he played 30 minutes per game for them in the playoffs. Who's going to fill in those minutes for them? They have some nice pieces coming off the bench, right? And Bobby Portis and Pat Connaughton, but who is going to be their 7th, 8th, 9th guy in games that really mattered? That is definitely in question, and that will be the key for the Milwaukee Bucks this season, is whether or not they can get good production from the rest of their roster. As for the Boston Celtics this upcoming season, the big question for me is Kristaps Porzingis. As it relates to Kristaps, I think there's both a question as to his availability as well as his fit with the Boston Celtics. Last year, Kristaps was healthy and he put up career numbers in Washington, but for the majority of his career, he has not been healthy. And as far as his fit with the Boston Celtics, you know, I am not that concerned about his fit offensively, actually, with the Boston Celtics, because I think his ability to stretch the floor and what the Boston Celtics have done in recent years with Al Horford, all of that should be an easier transition than you would expect. What I am really curious about is how good is Kristaps going to be defensively for the Boston Celtics? Because the Celtics, over the last few years, when they've been contenders, they've really prided themselves on being top of the league as a defensive team. You know, this past year, they had some regression defensively. And to get Kristaps Porzingis and to get Jrue Holiday, I suppose you can put it that way, they had to trade away Robert Williams. And Robert Williams was a guy that looked like he was going to be their defensive anchor, their starting center in the years to come, especially as Al Horford gets really, really up there in age. So can Kristaps fill in that role? Can he anchor, you know, a top 5, top 3, top 2 defense in the NBA? If he can, the Celtics will be in great shape. Moving on to the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, Vegas actually has the Lakers as the 5th best favorite to win the NBA championship, but the fifth at best by a significant margin. Like Vegas actually thinks the other four teams are quite a bit better than the Lakers. I don't agree with that. I think the Lakers are right up there with the other four. And the biggest reason is this, is that last year, post-trade deadline, the Lakers were one of the best teams in the NBA by a lot of metrics. A lot of those games without LeBron James, and even in the games where LeBron was playing, he was clearly not 100%. He also shot the three ball extremely poorly, which is something that I do not expect to happen again. I think there are a lot of players on this Lakers team that you can project to get better, which is not something you can say about every contending team. So Austin Reeves, Roy Hachimura, Jared Vanderbilt, I can all see getting better. I really like their free agent acquisitions a lot, and I don't think they lost anybody that important. So I really like that they added Taurean Prince. I like that they added Gabe Vincent. I think Christian Wood is a very up and down player, but especially in the regular season games where Anthony Davis has to rest or miss a lot of time, Christian Wood can step in and give you some big production as he's shown he's capable of. Anthony Davis, to his credit, has actually been more healthy than people think over the last few years. But, they need him, right? This team does not have a chance without him. And they not only need him, they need him at 100% where he can be, one of the best defensive players in the NBA, which he was during the playoffs last year. So that to me is the key. The key is basically just the health and availability of Anthony Davis and LeBron James. Okay, now moving on to the Phoenix Suns. I've been talking about this all offseason. The big question for me with the Phoenix Suns is who are their role players going to be? I have zero concerns about Durant, Booker, Beal, and Nurkic and how well they fit together. Zero concerns. I think as long as they're healthy, they will be absolutely phenomenal offensively. And defensively, those guys are good enough with a guy like Frank Vogel as their head coach for them to be an above league average defense. But to win an NBA championship, you need at least 8 guys. And so outside of those 4 guys, who is going to be their 5th starter and who are the 2 or 3 or 4 players that can come off the bench and give them close to 20 minutes per game? This is what the regular season is for. They're going to use the regular season to figure out who their guys are. If those guys are competent enough, then this will be a contender team. Otherwise, they're going to have a disappointing season. And then last, the Denver Nuggets. The reigning NBA champions, and last year they were the best team in the league by quite a significant margin. However, this year, they did lose some important pieces. They lost Bruce Brown Jr., who was really big for them, and Jeff Green, who also played a lot of minutes for them in the playoffs. And they didn't exactly add anybody that you feel great about. And so the big question for the Nuggets this year is who's going to fill in those minutes for Bruce Brown and Jeff Green? I mean, is the answer Justin Holiday? Maybe. Is the answer just Christian Brown playing a lot more minutes? Maybe. Is the answer one of these rookies that they drafted stepping up and giving you quality minutes come playoff time? I'm certainly not ruling that out because that's exactly what happened with Christian Brown last year. I mean, the thing is this, the Nuggets were the best team last year by a significant margin, but at the same time, I think the top of the NBA has also gotten better this upcoming season. And so the Nuggets simply keeping pace with what they were last year might actually not be enough for them to repeat as champions. I promised at the end of the video, I would give my prediction, and I really do not have a particular reason for choosing them over the other 5. It's just going to be a gut feeling, sort of a hard to quantify reason. But I'm going to go with the Lakers this year, and since they're my official preseason pick, I guess I'm going to be at least a partial Lakers fan for this year. So yeah, go Lakers, I guess. But okay, that covers it for this video. I'm super excited about this upcoming NBA season. I think there really is a lot of parity at the top of the league, and I'm really curious to see how things shake out. So I'll see you guys in the next few videos. I'm going to be making a lot more content as the season gets kicked off.